Sylvester Stallone is one of my absolute favorite actors of all time, and this week we've got a new Rambo movie, so it seemed like the absolute perfect time to stop and rank Sylvester Stallone's top 20 highest grossing movies from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comment section. Share your ranking of Sylvester Stallone's top 20 highest grossing movies. My list isn't the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours. If you need the list, it's down below in the description. Couple things on the list. First, it's based off of United States gross. Second, I only included live action films, not voice work, so there's no ants. Third, he had to be a major part of the film, so no Guardians of the Galaxy 3. One final thing before we get started. Right now, there's a 35% off sale in my merch store. So my I Talk Movies Too Much shirts are on sale. A bunch of the other shirts that I wear in my videos can be purchased in my merch store. That's $13 t-shirts. Everything is 35% off. It's gonna last for a few days. Check that link out in the description to see if there's something that you'd like. With that said, let's get started. Coming in last place is Spy Kids 3D. Now, to be fair, this is a movie designed to entertain children. I watched it a few days ago with my two kids and they loved it, and then they made me rewatch it yesterday as well. So I've seen it 2 times in the last 3 days. As a grown man, there's really nothing in this to say anything positive about. It is not a good movie. The script, the acting, and the visual effects are all about at the level of a Disney Channel TV show. I mean, it is not good. When they do the special effects, and it's entirely about these children getting sucked up into a video game, so it's all special effects, they're extremely basic stuff. There's parts where they're trying to grab like an item and they're looking at it and they're looking at different places, and then they grab it and you can see it kind of shuffling around in their hands because they didn't like put a brick in this kid's hands or whatever they would normally do to green screen it out. I mean, it's that type of movie where they make basic level mistakes. The third act of the film is actually shot in theory here in Austin, Texas, right on Congress Avenue in front of the Capitol building, and very clearly they're just on a green screen. Even though the movie was made here, none of the actors were actually on Congress Avenue. So many things about it are just painful, and the hard part about it is that Stallone is the villain, and he tries to give one of these hammy performances, and it's really tough to see him doing it, especially if you've been watching his career as long as I have. To see this movie for the first time at my age, it very cringe-inducing, and you feel bad for him because it is at that level of children's cable television, and it's not an image you want in your head for Stallone, so without question, this one comes at last. At number 19 is The Specialist. This is a very odd mix of genres. The basic plot line involves Sharon Stone hiring Sylvester Stallone, a bomb expert, to try and get revenge on the people that wronged her family. That's the basic plot line, but it's like a weird mix of action thriller with erotic thriller. So you have a scene inside this movie where Sylvester Stallone's like doing yoga with his shirt off while listening to recordings of Sharon Stone talking about wanting to blow people up, and then it cuts over to her sending him these recordings, and she's like in lingerie laying out on a chair, and then the next scene is Stallone blowing people up. Bizarre mix of things. It's also a movie with a far too complicated plot line because Sharon Stone's going undercover, and then there's multiple agencies and the FBI and traitors and whodunits and who's on which side, and when you put all the pieces together, it just doesn't work. If you want an erotic thriller, there's not nearly enough of that in here to kind of whatever you want from that. If you want an action movie, there's not enough of that. And when you put the pieces together, the mix is just really, really weird. Next up is Cobra. I've actually never been a big Cobra fan. On paper, I feel like I should be the target audience for this film, as it is an 80s action movie with all the tropes of the genre that I normally love. It's got Stallone, but the actual way it fits together, it's just never resonated with me all that well. I think part of it is that it has all the excesses of the 1980s, and you've got a guy whose last name is Cobretti, so everyone calls him Cobra, and he's always wearing gloves and a leather jacket, and he's got a cobra on the grip of his pistol, all of that, but it's played with a pretty straight face, and it has kind of a very dark storyline about this evil cult serial serial killer killing people, in which case it takes itself way too seriously in certain scenes and then is far too cheesy in other scenes that it doesn't quite mix right for me. So I never have been able to resonate with the way I want to. The most interesting thing about this movie for me is that several years before this, Sylvester Stallone was originally attached to star in Beverly Hills Cop, and he had all these ideas that he wanted to work into the script and these different scenes and sequences. And then when he left the project and Eddie Murphy came in, Stallone took all of those ideas that he had, and that's what the movie Cobra is. So in some strange way, Cobra is Stallone's alternate universe version of Beverly Hills Cop. Number 17 is The Expendables 2, and I'll say this real quick. This movie and the next 16 above it are all movies that I thoroughly enjoy. A lot of people preferred Expendables 2 to the first Expendables because it was a little bit more tongue-in-cheek and self-aware. For me, I actually prefer the original Expendables. We'll get to it in just a second. This one, I appreciated the tongue-in-cheek stuff. It's the sort of thing that watching it one time, I really enjoyed kind of Chuck Norris showing up and making Chuck Norris jokes. I enjoyed in the third act as you have Schwarzenegger and Bruce Willis riding in a car together, cracking their classic lines back and forth. But I don't think it makes for as rewatchable of a film. Also, this one to me, had, once again, that kind of trouble in mixing what it was going for, because in certain sequences it's very serious, where you have one of the members of the team getting brutally killed by Van Damme in front of them and they can't do anything about it, so they're out for revenge. And then the next scene is, you know, Chuck Norris cracking Chuck Norris jokes. And I don't think it quite mixes, once again, like a lot of these films at the bottom of this list. But like I said, it's a lot of fun to see all of these action heroes in one movie getting these opportunities to crack jokes and play up their personas. I love that they got Van Damme in this film. So while I got a couple issues with it, it's also dark. It's a very dark, overcast film, and I didn't like that about it. But beyond kind of some of these nitpicks, it really is a lot of fun. Next up, you've got Tango and Cash, the buddy cop action film with Sylvester Stallone and Kurt Russell, with Terry Hatcher as Sylvester Stallone's little sister and Jack Palance as our villain. You put all those pieces together, it's not quite as good as I would expect it to be, but it's done with so much fun and so much energy. I was never bored whenever I've watched the film. It does have some nice little one-liners here and there. The big showdown at the end is a lot of fun, where they're in this car just blowing stuff up and jumping over hills and stuff like that. The movie overall, I thought some of the humor landed a little bit flat. The one-liners don't work as well as the movie seems to think that they do. They're delivered with all the energy that they're supposed to, but you're like, that's not quite as clever as you think it is. Likewise, the movie has a subplot where they go to prison for a little bit, and I think that that was probably a pretty big misstep inside of it, that they just should have been on the run inside of the city. I always get kind of bored when they go off to prison for this little bit of time. It's like, what are we doing here? So overall, a movie that looks better on paper than I think it is in practice, but it's not bad, it's not boring. Just not quite as good as it could be. Number 15 is The Expendables. Sylvester Stallone brings together a bunch of his action buddies from different generations, different subgenres, different international markets to make one big, gigantic action movie that isn't quite as good as you would think given the cast, but if you just take it as a throwback action movie, it really is quite a bit of fun for me. Inside of it, you have a fairly straightforward setup of this team of expendable mercenaries that you can always switch out people depending on what movie you're in and who's available when you're shooting. So a fun little concept that Stallone came up with there. The basic plot line inside of it, it's generic action movie stuff. The thing that makes the movie pop is, of course, that you have all these different personalities. And I do think the first one is the best of the bunch because it does take itself seriously. Not too seriously, but it plays it like an action movie. So as a fan of the genre, I can just go along for the ride. I love seeing all of these guys together, especially, the reunion of Rocky and Drago, getting to see people like Statham and Stallone starting to work together. Things like that make this very interesting inside of it. So for me, this was the best of the Expendables movies and a solid action thriller, while not necessarily being as good as the concept. I think a lot of people thought because you're getting all these people together, it's going to transcend the genre. It doesn't transcend the genre. It is a genre film with a fantastic cast. Next up is Rambo First Blood Part 2. This is actually the highest grossing Sylvester Stallone movie of all time. It was certainly a product of its time, as it was coming just about 15 years after the end of the Vietnam War, and there were a lot of people that wanted to see a different outcome for that war, and Stallone provided the movie where that happened. It abandons the tone of the original film. It abandons the character study of that one, kind of has its own little bit of political agenda, and then it is just pure action movie mayhem, almost from beginning to end. This is Stallone, where you can see the vanity creeping into the mix, where he just looked absolutely jacked and is running around with his shirt off the whole time and doing these hero poses. It's a lot of fun for all its action movie iconic shots inside of it, non-stop action. It hasn't necessarily aged the best, though. It feels like a product purely of its time. Even some of the way that it looks and things about it have dated it a good bit, but still an iconic action film. Coming in at number 13 is Rambo 3. I actually really go back and forth between whether I like 2 or 3 in this series more. As of this moment right now, I'm feeling like Rambo 3 has aged just a little bit better, having rewatched all of them in the last month. But when I say that, what I mean is that the production value of Rambo 3 it's probably the biggest production of a Stallone starring movie. It was the most expensive movie ever made when it came out, and the action sequences are just filled with these big shots of a helicopter swooping over. There's 2 armies charging into each other while there's big explosions, and it's all in frame at the same time. Very cool, large-scale action sequences. I mean, this is all before CGI. It's not model work. This is legit explosions and stunt work. Inside of it, it's also the glossiest of the Rambo movies. Rambo's cracking a few more jokes than he did before. This is peak Stallone, jacked, muscle ripped, all of that fun stuff. And just even Rambo as an iconic, legendary hero. This is the one where, he's getting impaled inside the film, pulls the stick out, pours gunpowder in it, lights himself on fire, and goes back to beating people up the next day. I mean, it's ridiculous, but I think it's a very slick, well-produced 1980s action movie. Now, it does have the problem of also being very ill-timed, as it deals with a conflict between Soviet Union and Afghanistan that was resolved, or was being resolved by the time the movie came out. And certainly in light of September 11th, it has not aged well in that regard. But as just an action movie, it's a nice little product. Then we have Rocky III. This is where the franchise veered from being sports drama to being 80s product, as I like to call them, where you have Sylvester Stallone just knowing how to please an audience. So what do? You have Rocky battle a wrestler in Hulk Hogan, Thunder Lips. You have him battling Mr. T, Clubber Lang, and you have him partnering up with Apollo Creed to make all of this happen. It still manages to have the heart inside of it, find those emotions about what does the hero do when he's fallen, who does he partner up with. You have that bromance between Rocky and Apollo Creed being formed inside of this film. I've always been someone, as you can tell, that we haven't mentioned Rocky IV yet, that's preferred Rocky IV to Rocky III. I know a lot of people like Rocky III more than Rocky IV. This one has never quite flowed as well for me as that one. I appreciated that Rocky IV went fully to the 80s cheese level on that one. But, I mean, this is another one that just has so many great moments inside of it, so many iconic moments inside of it. This is the movie that gave us Eye of the Tiger, and it's the one that laid the groundwork really for us to get the Creed film. Number 11 is Cliffhanger. This is a nice little 90s action thriller from Stallone, where he started to shed some of the cheesy excesses of his 80s action movies, but it doesn't shed any of the action goodness of those films. Do you want to oversimplify? It's a little bit like Die Hard on a Mountain, with Stallone as a mountain climber trying to rescue some friends on top of a mountain where terrorists are trying to collect bags of money that have spread all across the top of this mountain. John Lithgow is this wonderfully over-the-top villain inside of it. Michael Rooker, Yondu from Guardians of the Galaxy, is kind of one of the friends inside of it that Stallone is trying to rescue. It kicks off with this fantastic sequence of trying to do a rescue on top of a mountain, and the tension starts to build as you start to things go wrong inside of it, sets up the emotional kind of current throughout the entire film. If you haven't seen this one, I do highly recommend you check it out if you want to see some Stallone that's not quite full 80s cheese. Kicking off our top 10 is Rocky II. Of all the Rocky sequels, without question, this is the one that most closely resembles the tone of the original film in focusing in on the character journeys of both Rocky as well as Apollo Creed. It has one of the best training montages inside of the entire franchise, and the final fight inside of this one is a really nice continuation of what they established in the first film and the abilities of Rocky, what he could do if he really committed himself, as well as Apollo Creed and his ego and his own issues inside of it. I think this one does drag a little bit in the middle where they're trying to show Rocky's failures at retiring from boxing, and it dwindles there a little bit too long before we get back to what we want to see. But overall, a great sequel to the original one that continues those themes and offers even more payoff. Next up is Rambo or Rambo 4. After a 20-year hiatus from the Rambo character, Stallone returned with by far his most brutal, vicious, and graphically violent film to date, and maybe ever. This is a film that decides to show you the brutal realities of war. At its core is a fairly straightforward story about missionaries wanting to go into Burma. Things go wrong, and Rambo has to step into action to try and save the day. But I think what it does well is it adds just enough of kind of an exploration of Rambo's worldview in contrast with the missionaries. But inside of it, you'll also get just some vicious, vicious action sequences. This great little bit about Rambo as the boatman where these guys are talking down to him, and it's almost like an inside joke to us as the audience because we know what Rambo can do, we know his history, and these guys don't know it, so they're treating him like garbage, which leads to some wonderful payoff as you go into the second half of the film. This is a movie that felt very delayed. It could have gone horribly wrong, but I think Stallone wisely just decided to take it once again in a tonally very different direction from the rest of the franchise. In doing so, it creates a unique and distinct place for itself inside of Stallone's filmography. Coming in at number 8 is Demolition Man. This is a really fun action comedy, kind of satire, starring Sylvester Stallone, Wesley Snipes, Sandra Bullock, Rob Schneider's in the mix as well, Dennis Leary's inside of it, and it's a movie that at face value could just look like another Sylvester Stallone sci-fi action film, but inside of it has this really funny sense of humor because what the plotline of it is that basically he's frozen for about 40 years, and when he's thawed out, society kind of had this big cataclysmic event that caused them to reset a little bit to where all sorts of things in society are wildly different. People listen to radio jingles like they're the oldies. The only restaurant in existence is Taco Bell, so everyone thinks Taco Bell is fine dining. And the way that you wipe after you go to the bathroom is with the 3 seashells, and no one will tell Sylvester Stallone how to use the 3 seashells. It's also illegal to say curse words, and so then Stallone has to say curse words to get tickets so that he can cleanse himself inside of the film. It's got some great action, of course, because you got Stallone versus Wesley Snipes inside of it, but you also have a nice, wicked sense of humor inside of it, and you see a young Sandra Bullock kind of becoming the movie star in one of those early roles for her that established her. If you're in the mood for some action as well as some comedy, definitely check this one out. Then we have Rocky IV. This movie is less of a film and more of a fantastic 80s product as it just kind of abandons credibility and just goes for it when it comes to the excesses of the 80s. It's a movie where it's America versus the Russians. It's Rocky out for revenge against Drago. It's a movie that has more montages than I have fingers. I mean, it's got a funeral montage. It's got a robot dancing montage. It's got 3 or 4 different trainings montages. It has a travel to Russia montage. It has a dance number from Apollo Creed. It is a ridiculous film, and it is absolutely wonderful. Without question, this is the Rocky movie that I've rewatched the most. It embraces what it's going for so much that it's a little bit infectious. Now, it's a movie, if you watched it now without any context, you'd be like, what on earth am I watching? But it's also a film that if you're someone like me that likes to work out, this has so many training montages that can just get you pumped up and in the mood to lift weights. It's a movie that so many things about it are totally indefensible, but it's wonderful nonetheless. Number 6 is Creed 2. This is a film that managed to do something quite remarkable. It's a direct follow-up to the original Creed, as well as the ridiculous 80s product that I just talked about, Rocky IV, but it manages to treat it like a serious drama. It takes an outrageous film, not grounded in reality at all, and finds the core emotions inside of it that would be interesting 30 years later, and it explores those. So inside of it, you start exploring family dynamics of Rocky's relationship with his son. You have Creed becoming a father himself, and then our villains inside of it, the Dragos, return. And in each side of these, they're looking inside of what does it mean to be a father? How does legacy matter? One thing that I loved about it is that as bad as the Dragos are inside of this film, and as much as you want to see them just destroyed, as you go through the film as well, you start to understand why they are the way they are in light of even things that were inside of Rocky IV that would explain the way that Drago would be treated for the last 30 years and why he would be doing what he's doing inside of this film. And in a lot of ways, this movie makes Rocky IV a better film and adds layers and depth to a film that came out over 30 years before. So for all those reasons, I just thought this was a great follow-up to the first Creed, as well as an incredible addition to the Rocky franchise for what it did for Rocky IV. Bringing us into our top 5 is Copland. If you don't know what this movie is, it's a cop drama from James Mangold of Walk the Line and Logan fame, starring Sylvester Stallone, Harvey Keitel, Ray Liotta, Robert De Niro, and then so many other people are inside of it, like Janine Garofalo, and all of them are actually pretty prominent inside of the film as this slow building mystery cop drama, as they have Stallone playing against type. He's not the hero cop. He's kind of a loser that's the sheriff inside of a small town where a bunch of cop families live that has some seedy history, and he's been ignoring it because he's just kind of happy that people like him a little bit because of past things have made him someone that could never progress in life. He always wanted to be a police officer inside of New York City, and he could never make the force because of something that happened to him when he was younger. And it's this nice little character study about this small town sheriff having to kind of become the hero that he's always wanted to be. It works on a character level. It works on a mystery level. It's a nice little cop drama. If you haven't seen this one, I highly recommend you check it out. Number 4 is Rocky Balboa. Now, I might be a little bit biased towards this film. It's the first film I saw in the theater after I got married. We actually went to go see it on our honeymoon. But this is a movie that I think Stallone did a great job of continuing this character, of thinking, where would he be 15 years later? Now that he's aging, how would he look back on his career and his legacy? Once again, inside of it, it just found a really nice way to find the character dynamics of what would Rocky do as this hero in this local town? What would he do with his relationship with Paulie? And what would make him feel the most lost? The loss of his wife. What would his dynamic be with his son? I thought all that worked really nicely. And even the scenario leading to the fight inside of the film, some people thought it was just too implausible that a person at that age could compete against a reigning champion. But if you look at kind of the career of George Foreman and the last final times that he won the title, as well as you consider the fact that they worked in certain elements inside the film of this was someone who'd never fought anyone serious. This was his opponent was. This is someone that showed up to the fight not prepared and he got injured during the fight. I think they worked in enough ingredients to where it made sense that it left the film of the movies as Rocky in the lead at a really nice point in time where you felt resolution to this 30-year arc for the character. It was very satisfying what they were able to do with him and his exploration of him, his dynamics with his friends, and the people around him. Real quick before I give you my top 3, remember to share your ranking down below in the comment section. My ranking isn't the right one. It's just mine, and I would love to see yours. Also, after this video, if you enjoy Sylvester Stallone's career, check out this playlist up above. I put together all of my Stallone rankings that I've done in the past up in one single playlist. So you got the Expendables, Rocky, Rambo, where I dig in deeper into all of those ones. If you've enjoyed this video and want more Stallone talk, you'll love something up there. In third place is Creed. Now, this is a movie, when they announced it, I thought that they were insane and they were just gonna create a movie that was going to ruin the franchise. The concept of Creed's son coming back as a boxer being trained by Rocky, I just thought was a terrible idea. I thought Rocky Balboa had closed out Rocky's story so well that this was just such a dangerous idea. And then I saw the film and I was immediately won over. They found a way to, once again, as I mentioned before with Creed 2, take a very ridiculous film and find the human emotion inside of it. What could come out of that would be really powerful. Of Apollo Creed had a love child that they kind of kept a secret because they didn't want to embarrass his legacy. And since you have someone that wants to stand on his own while coming from this incredible legacy, and he's not quite sure what to do with that, how to use it while standing as his own man, that's really profound stuff. And then add into the mix, you have Rocky, who's no longer the lead, and he's trying to figure out, what does that kind of look like? Does he want to step back into it? Does he think he could do a good job? And him having his own struggles inside of it, facing his own mortality. When you put all the pieces together, you get a really powerful addition to this franchise in one of the best Rocky movies, where Rocky's not the lead inside of it. All in all, a movie that hits all the emotional notes that you want from a Rocky movie while allowing Adonis to take the lead inside of it, but still giving Stallone possibly his best performance that he's ever given in any of his films. Our runner-up is First Blood. Because Rambo First Blood Part 2 was such a tonal shift from the original film and also such an iconic 1980s blockbuster film, a lot of people remember the original First Blood very differently than it actually was. Likewise, a lot of people think because all the other Rambo movies have such high body counts that First Blood has a bunch of dead people in it. It doesn't really. But in that film, Rambo's not this killing machine. He's a victim of society. He's a Vietnam vet that came back broken from the war with PTSD and doesn't know how to reacclimate to society, and therefore shows up in this town, and the town misreads what his intentions are and what he needs and wrongs him because of it. He just wants to be free, and in doing so, starts attacking police officers, and they just keep escalating things, so it just keeps escalating to very bad places. But it's this character study and study of kind of society and the way Vietnam veterans were treated and all sorts of things, where it's an idea film. It has the action, it has the thrills, it establishes these great characters in Troutman and Rambo and even Teasel. But it's also so much more than just about the war hero beating up the sheriff or anything like that. It's a very deep film with a lot of things to say while being very exciting and leading to a final monologue inside of it that some people have made fun of because you can't hear what Stallone's really saying, but it's Stallone really going for it about something he cared about, and that's what makes this movie very powerful. But coming in first place is Stop or My Mom Will Shoot. This is probably the funniest Stallone has ever been, and it has a lot to say about family. Just kidding, this movie didn't actually crack his top 20 highest grossing films. Shocking, I know. But really coming in first place is Rocky, the movie that puts Stallone on the map, maybe the most personal film that he ever made. To this day is still his best. It does what all great sports movies really do, that they're not really about the sports, they're about the characters, where the sports themselves are actually a visualization of the struggle going on inside of our characters themselves. Inside of this film, you get one of my absolute favorite movie characters of all time, probably my favorite movie character of all time, Rocky Balboa, who is this good-natured guy who's found himself with a pretty sleazy, shady job. Even though he has the potential to be someone better than he is, he's just never taken that chance. And that can resonate with so many of us on so many different levels. Inside of it, you get other great characters, whether the Polly, the jerk that Rocky just for some reason is devoted to. You get Apollo Creed inside of it. You establish kind of these ideas of training montages that became such an iconic element of all of these films. But it's a movie that works as the sports film, as you care about his journey to actually go the distance. It's not even about winning, it's just about going the distance. It, of course, works as this character study of this person taking a chance. It might be kind of a classic formula for a sports film, but it's one of the best examples of that formula coming to the big screen. It's established the template for sports movies for the last 40 years. So without question, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. It's my favorite Stallone movie, so it comes in at number 1. Remember, right now there's a sale going on in my merch store. You can check that out at the link down below. If you want more Stallone rankings, you can check out that video right over there. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.